Okay, we're back on Talkback 721-1290, and it's good to have Eran back with us in the studio along with Ginny Miriam. Hello again. How are you guys?
I'm doing great.
Good morning.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, now you and I had a chance to visit last week about a very important meeting that was held at the Committee of the Whole, where a lot of folks have been working a long, long time coming up with some very important ways to increase housing and to make it more affordable in Missoula. So what can you share with us about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for the last several years, Missoula has seen remarkable growth in our economy and population. That's brought challenges. Home prices have risen by $90,000 a year since 2013 over the last 5 years. And so that's a significant amount in our community. And we really were tasked with figuring out how to address this and how to make sure that Missoula stays a place where everyone can find a home. So we worked with our community, from neighborhood leadership teams to nonprofit providers, local developers, everyday citizens. Missoula's voices were really built into the eventual policy recommendations.
Okay. So what kind of things did they come up with, Eran?
So the housing policy process, again, involving all those Missoulians, really came up with strategies that are intentional and highly interdependent. And those are grouped into 4 primary areas. We're looking at aligning and leveraging existing funding resources to support housing. So figuring out how to use the financial tools we have better, more strategically, and then looking at creating an affordable housing trust fund to support housing development activity. Reducing barriers to new supply and promoting access. So really looking at the regulatory climate. How can we support new development? How can we incentivize that? How can we bring things like ADUs to the table?
Right. One of the things that we talked about the last time you were on was the fact that we live in a small area. It's you can't just create new places to build homes out of thin air. It just can't be done. But what you guys have been trying to do is work around that and work with what we actually have, right?
Absolutely. So today in Missoula, you are allowed to knock down a small, single-family, relatively affordable home and build a mansion. That's already allowed in Missoula right now. All we're trying to do is say that in addition to being able to build that mansion, you can also build something that's more affordable.
Okay. So now, give me some examples. Let's say somebody had what we used to call a McMansion, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted to tear that down and do something else. Depending upon the neighborhood where they live, where there are covenants and things like that, what kind of things can they do with these new regulations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're looking at approaching that on 2 sides, both trying to incentivize the type of development that we want to see, and then also looking at general land use changes that allow for more of that. So a great example, if you live in a single family neighborhood right now that's zoned for single family, we're not recommending that be eliminated. We want that to stay a single family neighborhood, but what we would like to see is more compact development. So townhomes, for example, accessory dwelling units that allow individuals to earn a little income on their private property and have the right to build those. So products that will allow more equity, more diversity within that neighborhood. Folks who live in neighborhoods that are zoned for multifamily apartment buildings, we want to continue to support that type of development as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what's the reception been so far? What kind of feedback are you getting?
I think the reception has been a byproduct of the robust process that we went through. Again, this contains the voices directly of over 400 Missoulians. We've worked with groups that have talked to an additional 3,000 Missoulians about this process who have all had a part and a voice in it. And the response that we're getting shows that those voices are built in. So, this plan has something for everyone. Not everyone loves everything in the plan, and I would argue they shouldn't, right? Because that's not what we're trying to achieve. But
Sure.
But the plan has something for everyone, and we're getting, I would say, a response that indicates that we really thoroughly address the need.
Now, when we use the term affordable housing, to the average person probably thinks affordable housing is obviously something I could afford, right? But is there a quantified term that is affordable housing for Missoula that we can start here and end here?
Yeah, that generally the term or the formula for that is about 30% of your take-home income. So at the end of the day, if I'm spending more than 30% of my income towards housing, I don't have enough money left over for childcare, for healthcare expenses, for groceries, for gas. So what's affordable to you is very different than what's affordable to me.
Mhm.
But the general metric is we shouldn't be asking people to pay more than 30% of their income towards housing.
So do we know where that ratio exists in Missoula now? Because when we asked this question before, we got a lot of guffaws saying, "Well, come on now, who out there really does spend 30%, or right around that mark?" Some are saying 40, 45, sometimes even 50%. So is there a plan to whittle that away so that we can start paying 30%?
Yeah, and that is skewed in Missoula, especially as it applies to renters. So generally, renters are paying upwards of 45% of their income towards housing in Missoula. I think that's indicative of the fact that renters are often earning less income as well. Homeowners are paying anywhere between 30 to 40% of their income, and we call that cost burden. And so if you're paying more than 30%, your housing has become a cost burden for you. And I think that there is a plan to continue to keep affordable housing, affordable to you, affordable to me, coming on the market at a cost that people can't afford. But the other side of the coin that we have to address that isn't spoken to in the housing policy are wages. So we have to continue to look at wages, and we have to continue to make sure that Missoula remains not just a place where everyone can find a home, but a place where everyone can thrive and earn the living that they need to take care of their families.
Now, Ginny, you and I were talking before we started the program, and someone had asked that specific question about wages, and because they harken back to the 70s when we had the mill and people were making a really good living and they could afford and houses cost a lot less way back then. What's happening? You have some numbers that you wanted to share with us on that.
I do, Peter. I dug up these numbers because Grant Gear, who's the director of the Missoula Economic Partnership, had talked at City Club just this month and brought up he had been asked this question.
Mm-hmm.
So how come our wages, where we have all this development, we have new businesses coming to town, we have a tech sector that's flourishing, why are our wages not keeping up? And he basically said, he couldn't explain that completely.
Sure.
But he said they are going up. And the example he used, the figures he used were from the census, that the median household income between 2013 and 2017 in Missoula County went up 7.1%, which is
It's pretty good.
That's okay.
That's
We'll
not
take
bad.
it.
That's not bad.
During that time, the cumulative inflation rate in the United States overall was 5.2. So I guess you could say, okay, we had a 1.9% net gain, but it's still, wages are still going up in Missoula County.
Mm-hmm.
We would all like to see them go up more quickly and more dramatically.
Sure. And one of I know Mayor Engen is one of his goals, his life goals as mayor, is to make this a really a fun, a good place where people actually want to move to, right? And so many people want to move here. It's kind of like Bozeman. It's kind of like Whitefish, Kalispell. So many people want to move here that sometimes the demand outstrips the supply when it comes to a really nice place for everyone to live. And that's what this is addressing, right,
True.
Eran?
Yeah, the goal of the plan is to make sure that Missoula is attractive and that Missoula is a place that has a high quality of life. But we really want to focus on making sure that people who are here today, folks that are born and raised in Missoula, are not just given a space to stay here, but given the ability to thrive here.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. This is our monthly edition of City Talk. Folks from the city of Missoula, Ginny Mirren, Communications Director. Eran Pehan is also joining us this morning, talking about housing and a brand new plan that was just unveiled last week, and we're going to come back and talk about that. By the way, our phone lines are open, 721-1290. If you have a comment or a question, this is your chance to talk to the folks from the city of Missoula. We'll be back.
Peter,
Yes, ma'am. You like those?
kind of shortening just your way.
Just Crisco.
Crisco.
Actually, most of the time she uses butter.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
That's
And
the
they're
key,
actually
right?
going to have some open houses. There's one on May 30th from 11 to 1 at the City Council chambers. So
I did forum last night, community forum, housing policy.
The thing I love,
It's on May 30th
Totally
from
normal.
11
Chip
a.m.
cookies.
to 1 p.m.
And most chocolate chip cookies are hard and crumbly.
I don't
right?
like
They
those.
just-
Yeah.
No,
Just melt in your mouth.
these are super good.
Not a single question about ADUs. Not a single comment about density. Not a single comment about info.
You know, and the mayor, the only things he's gotten is snotty email about ADUs,
Mhm.
but not very
From-
much.
from Dennis Gordon.
Yeah,
Oh,
not very
I worked
much.
there.
What
when
you
I
expect,
worked for it.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still go there
I've
all the
had
time.
average people ask me,
Hmm.
so does this mean now I can convert my garage to an ADU?
Hmm.
Yep.
Well, let's ask about that.
Yeah.
We should talk about
Yeah.
those
Because-
more, because they're called granny flats.
Right.
Yeah.
Colloquially, because
Fonzie
it has to
flats.
be a family
Sure.
member.
Right. Yeah.
So could I do that and make it a rental?
Yeah.
I've had several people ask me that.
Yeah. Which
I
gives
have-
people income and their retirement.
Patton
and-
is just waiting.
Yeah.
My neighbor.
I have a house on St. Thomas Drive at Miller Creek.
Uh-huh.
It's an acre,
Yeah.
and we split it into 2 half-acre lots
Yep.
many, many years ago. But because
Did you sell the other?
no, it's still we still have it. We're
Yeah.
paying property taxes on it. But what I want to do is I want to be able. You'd have to see it to understand it. It'd be very difficult to develop
Yep.
unless I could switch the boundaries around
Yeah.
and put it closer to where my house is.
Yeah.
And if that's possible, then we would have an opportunity at the end of my driveway. We live off
Yeah.
the road. My house would be here. We could have another smaller house here,
Yeah.
and all the utilities would go right to both places. So,
Makes so much
I
sense.
think that's really easy to do administratively.
so who would I talk to about that?
Development services.
Okay,
Yeah.
would they send
I can-
somebody out
Just
and
a
look at it?
boundary line.
I can email
location.
you the name of.
Because
Have someone.
they would have to
Yep.
survey it, because we had we had one of the WGM group
Mhm.
did the surveys for us.
Yep.
And so that wasn't available 15 years ago.
So you might
Yeah.
not even have to research.
Oh,
No, I think you just move that line.
Mhm.
okay.
Question?
Hmm?
Question for? No. Okay. Whether you say this every day, call us. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. I'm Peter Christian, Nick Christensen over there, taking your phone calls and producing the show. This is the Friday edition of Talkback at City Talk. Ginny Miriam joining us in the studio along with Eran Pehan. And during the break, you guys were talking about some of the responses you got about, what do they call, accessory dwelling units, ADUs? So what are some of the questions and comments that you're receiving, Ginny?
First, we should probably say what an ADU actually
Yeah, ADU,
is.
yeah.
I know. Accessory dwelling
A little
unit
closer to the mic there. Go ahead.
is, they're often actually called granny flats. So if
Okay.
you wanted to convert your garage into a tiny home or
Right.
living space,
Mhm.
or another thing that people do is add a second story above a garage or above their houses. And right now, there's a requirement that you have related people all live on the property. And so that home is deed restricted. And one of the recommendations, right, Erin, is that we open that up to people can be doing that and rent it to somebody. And I have had several people in my neighborhood and not just who I know saying, does this mean that I can turn my garage into an ADU and rent it? But the idea being that then it helps them pay their mortgages.
Right, exactly. Or save for retirement or whatever.
The other side of ADUs, people who are opposed to loosening the rules on ADUs would say, I don't want the increased number of people in my neighborhood that brings.
Mhm.
I don't want another car or two in my neighborhood. And so those things have to be mitigated when you promote that kind of development.
Sure. Erin, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with Jenny. I think ADUs are a great home type that is often called invisible infill because you don't have to build new infrastructure. You don't have to build new roads or pull sewer lines in. It's all right there, and it lets us use the infrastructure in place. Some of the fears that we have around ADU development is that they're going to change the character of a neighborhood. And people in Missoula care about their neighborhoods. We love that about Missoula. There are unique characteristics in each neighborhood that make them special. And we just want to highlight those characteristics can and will remain. But Missoula needs to evolve. All cities need to evolve, and we need to make sure that we evolve in a way that accommodates people who need homes. And ADUs are a great example of how Missoula can do that.
Are there some specific cities that already have ADUs in place where maybe you've, seen what it's done there and seen how it would maybe work in our kind of area?
Absolutely. And I think, thankfully, we don't have to look outside of Missoula. So ADUs have been allowed in Missoula for quite some time. And it wasn't until 2013 that we put some of these more strenuous regulations like the owner occupancy piece that Jenny had talked about into place. And we really see the impact of that. Since 2013, 5 ADUs or maybe 6 ADUs have been developed in the city of Missoula. And you can drive through those neighborhoods and you can see ADUs that either historically have been built and are grandfathered in or are newer to neighborhoods. And you can see how they really incorporate within a neighborhood and they don't change the character and they fit pretty seamless.
Are there some cities where they've implemented ADUs where it has changed the character that you've noticed, or have you not seen any of that?
I would say if we want to look at the most aggressive ADU development in the nation, that's going to be in Portland, Oregon, where they have eliminated almost all regulations that apply to ADUs as a way to manage what they're really going through, which is very clearly a housing crisis right now. And even in a city like Portland, where they eliminate all regulation, which we're not proposing to do, at the scale that Portland development is occurring, less than 1% of their new housing stock are ADUs. And so it's a model that can work well, but it's not something we need to be concerned is going to explode across the community.
And isn't that why you have a development services or agency, right? Because they know neighborhood by neighborhood what's available and what isn't available. So if you have questions, you can call those folks, right?
Yeah, we have incredible staff at our development services division who are experts in this code, which I never pretend to be, and can guide folks through this process.
Mm-hmm. So it isn't just somebody there with a stamp saying no, you can't do that, and they do work with you.
Yeah, our goal at the city of Missoula is to partner in all these areas. We know that we're not going to be able to solve the housing situation alone. We need to partner with the private community, and we all need to be working towards the same goals.
Okay, phone lines are open. If you have a question about housing in Missoula, cricket. I know you do. 721-1290 is our number. And we have the folks from the city here, of the city of Missoula. It's City Talk today. Communications Director Jenny Merriam and Eran Pehan also joining us here in the studio to answer your questions about housing. This is the time right now, 721-1290. We'll be back. So, yeah, I'll give you my email address.
Yeah.
And if you could send me.
Yeah, I've got it.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I got it.
If you could send me the name of the person I'd like to talk to, because we love where we live. We're literally off of St. Thomas Drive.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, about 150 feet off the road. And it's almost like living in the country. We have herds of deer in our backyard, and we have all
It's
sorts
gorgeous.
of critters and all that kind of stuff. But thank you. Where our driveway comes up to our house, we put a basketball court down here, right? And there's a concrete slab, and there's plenty of room there for a small house.
Yeah.
And so if there's a way we can take what the land that's in the back of my house, which is the lot, and move it basically to where that's at, that would be so much easier to develop than going behind my house.
Yeah, that's a really easy process.
That would be an administrative thing.
It's just called a boundary line readjustment.
You
Yeah.
have to go to city council.
Wow.
Oh, it should be really easy.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Remember when there was the big kerfuffle in the 90s about boundary line relocations? And
Yeah, I was in it. That's when we did our thing.
It
Yeah.
was happening in the University District, and a lot of that was about people were trying to create smaller lots.
Right.
But if you already have the land, like I have 4 lots,
Mm-hmm.
and I could just split my property in half and sell that to somebody to build a house.
Sure.
You could split it
And
in
that's
fourths.
administrative.
Mm-hmm.
Standard city lots going for $100,000 right now.
Rattlesnake.
Even more.
Katie said we could place this for $200,000. Or we could do a spec house. Maybe when I'm old. And it's
Okay, we
easy to
have
pay for the
a
beehive.
caller on the line,
It's a
so we'll
great
do that when we
investment.
come. And we are back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. It's City Talk today. Eran Pehan joining us along with Ginny Miriam. And let's get John on the line. John, good morning. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, sir. What's on your mind?
Well, I got a question about when she was talking about mortgage at being, 15, 20, 50% of your income.
Yes, sir.
Does that include the taxes on your monthly mortgage? And the reason I ask, I have a small story that my property 3 years ago was appraised and refied for a certain amount, kind of low, but we're modest. And 3 years later, it went up 75%. And my monthly taxes went up roughly about $100 a month in 3 years.
So your question is this...
My question is
yeah.
is that mortgage payment that she's talking about where you have to be affordable, as far as monthly payments, how does that equate?
Does that include
tax?
property taxes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. You want to hang on the phone or can we just let her answer?
Oh, she can answer. That's
Okay.
fine.
Thanks for the call. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So yes, property taxes, HOA fees, everything that ties into your housing, generally you want that calculation to be lower than 30%. That's not a calculation that mortgage underwriting uses. That's not a calculation that the financial industry per se uses. That's just a general rule of thumb that when you're looking at your housing costs, you want to try to keep them under that level. And housing costs change. Property taxes are a great example of how housing costs can change over time. You do get that correlation of equity in your home and your asset is growing. And that asset is an investment for a lot of people, but it doesn't impact your cash flow, right? And so that's a calculation I think that definitely starts to skew that percentage.
I think it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
So, well, my kind of follow-up question is, I think what he's asking is, when we talk about it shouldn't be 30%, we're talking strictly mortgage.
No,
right?
we're actually talking total housing costs.
We are rolling
Yep.
property taxes, homeowners insurance, all those things.
Absolutely.
So that's sorry, I shouldn't laugh out loud, but
No.
yeah,
Laughing too.
yeah, in Missoula, going what? Say what?
Mhm.
So I guess I'm not sure exactly how to solve that particular problem, but one phenomenon that just amazes me is we want to talk about affordable housing, right? And yet everyone who buys a house wants to pay the least they can possibly pay. Everybody who's selling a house wants to get the most they can possibly get.
Right.
That is the law of supply and demand. That's capitalism at its finest at work here in Missoula. And so when we have fewer number of homes, more people, that's where the bidding wars start. You say you list a house at $300,000 and boom, 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 the offers go, go, go. Sometimes it can be $30,000 more than the asking price. And then the rest of the people just are crestfallen because how can we possibly afford that? And I realize there's nothing the city can do about that matrix. But how do you address that and say, you know what, it's not hopeless out there?
Absolutely. And, we want people to gain equity in their home. In America, home ownership is how we gain wealth. It's how we gain equity. And so there is the opposite correlation. Homes today are $90,000 more on average than they were 5 years ago. That also means that homeowners today have gained $90,000 in equity in their home. That's incredible wealth generation. And we want that equity increase to continue to occur, but we want that to occur at a healthier rate. Standard inflation should be, under 6% per year for homes, ideally closer to 3 or 4% per year per home. And we're seeing double, triple that amount. And so our goal is to get that inflation back down to a healthy rate.
So how do you do that? I mean, is there a way administratively to help that happen? Aside from messing with the powers of nature, if you will.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned capitalism, and this is the supply and demand sector.
Right.
So when supply is pinched, as it is right now, inflation goes up dramatically because competition goes up dramatically. Like you said, there are 20 offers per home and we have cash buyers. And so as we get more supply on the market, that competition will naturally start to go down. People will know that they will have options, and then they won't be bidding 20-30% more than asking price for a home that's on the market today. And so our goal is to spur the market through incentives, through regulatory land changes, to increase housing supply, to get that inflation rate back down to a healthy level.
So for people who, let's say they live in a residence, because I live in the Miller Creek area, okay? And there's some very nice homes there. Some are on an acre, some are on 3/4 of an acre. So some have land that could be used for another home. And for folks who've been living there for 20, 30 years, like myself, the idea is, well, I guess we're just kind of stuck where we are. But we can always ask if there's a possibility of using the land that we have in a more creative way, right?
Absolutely. So we were talking during the break, folks just like you, Peter, who live in the Miller Creek, who live in the Rattlesnake, oftentimes are living on large double, triple city lots or on acres. Today, there is a process in the code where you can adjust your boundary line, where you can subdivide your lot, where you can either sell or build an additional house next to yours and reap the benefit of that, either in retirement or today as your kids are going to college, as you have expenses. So those are ways that folks can cash in on that equity that they have in their investment and also support and participate in the housing solution in Missoula.
Okay, let's get another call on the line. And Kevin, thank you for holding, sir. You're on with Eran, Pehan, and Ginny Miriam. Go ahead.
Well, good day, and happy Memorial Weekend to everybody.
Thank you.
And happy birthday too, Peter.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Hey, either Eran can ask this question. Do you think Section 8 housing has a lot to do with a lot of the apartments being built, knowing that they can get guaranteed money for the Section 8 housing? There just seems to be a lot of people who are on Section 8 housing in Missoula now.
Hold, you might want to describe what Section 8 housing is, Eran.
Yeah, absolutely. So Section 8 housing are housing vouchers that come from the federal government, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And essentially that voucher will reimburse a private landlord in the community a portion of the rent, depending on that person's income. And so my response to that, Kevin, would be, I think that is a perception. I've heard that floating around before, and I would like to unequivocally say that is not true. Section 8 vouchers are capped in the city of Missoula. We have a certain amount of Section 8 vouchers. We will never get more. And so if a private developer today wants to go build 100 units to apply Section 8 vouchers to, those vouchers just simply don't exist. We have a set number in our community and we will not get more.
Are we maxed out now?
We are absolutely maxed out, and all those vouchers are deployed in the community, which is why we have about a 1,700 person waiting list, which is about 3 to 5 years with the Missoula Housing Authority to
and
apply
how many
that
vouchers?
voucher.
How many vouchers are for the Missoula City area and Missoula County area? How do they do that?
That's a great question, Kevin, and I don't have that specific number, but I think it's less than about 1,000 vouchers, and that is formulaic. It's population based, and HUD isn't issuing new vouchers to communities at that time. It's also important to note that the federal government does also cap that. There is what's called a fair market voucher limit. And so the federal government will only pay a specific amount of money based on fair market rents in your community. And so fair market rents, what you could rent your apartment to anyone on the private market, always exceeds what HUD is willing to reimburse that landlord for.
Oh, okay. Thank you for answering my question.
You bet. Thanks for the call. Yeah, we're going to come right back. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. Eran Pehan joining us along with Ginny Miriam. This is City Talk. So if you have a question or comment about housing, this is the time. And again, the number is 721-1290.
I hear that all the time. It's a common, yeah. Rent or landlords are building these and just taking government payments, and we could only if it were only true.
Yeah,
it would be
really.
a dream.
Yeah, because we'd have those housing all the way
Mhm.
to the horizon, right?
There wouldn't be a 5-year waiting list.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. hmm
Mhm.
Charles is on the line.
I don't have a good answer for that one, so let's hope not.
I actually asked my king.
Yeah, there are design review standards, but they're not good enough because we're still getting ugly apartments. They're better.
The building that people reference is And on the north side, barrack style
Yeah.
buildings
Yep.
up against the freeway.
In the
super ugly.
tracks. And yeah,
And Mike says, we just don't allow that.
I would argue though that all of Wilson's developments are terrible. Like the ones across from the good food store that are set back, the ones behind Home Depot. And those are built under new design standards.
It'd be so much more
Yeah.
interesting.
Single colors, single material types. I mean, those exterior entries with the stairwells. I hate those.
It seems like we should do all together.
Mhm. Yeah.
This hour goes so
It
fast.
does go really fast. Probably not for you guys.
Oh, it does.
Oh, it does
Really?
goes fast. Yeah.
Yes, it's really
Oh.
fast.
Yeah. I get here at
An hour
3
and a
a.m.
half,
and it's
so-
like 10 o'clock.
When
rolls
are
around.
you on though? When do you?
I'm on the air from 6 to 8:30 doing the news.
Yeah.
And then we do talk back from 8:30 to 10.
Okay.
And the news I do by myself. And
Yeah.
then Nick comes in and helps with talk back. Here we go.
Wanders in.
This is the Friday edition of Talk Back. It's City Talk. Joining us in this morning in the studio, Jeannie Miriam, Communications Director for the city, and Eran Pehan. Now, Eran, what is your title? I forgot to ask.
I am the Director of Housing and Community Development for
Woo!
the city.
All right, that's a big business card. Charles is on the line. Good morning, Charles. What's up?
Hey, hello. Hey, one of the impediments to ADUs and also splitting lots up, like Peter mentioned, in his property is that if you have an existing mortgage, it's going to be difficult to get financing for that or to split that lot because that's part of the value. So my question is, does the city have any plans or thought about trying to help people with mortgaging so we can get some of these lots that are available to be split and increase our housing?
All right, that's a good question. Thanks for the call, Charles.
That
Sure.
is an excellent question, Charles. And you hit the nail on the head. The vast majority of individuals who want to build an ADU today can't build an ADU because with banking reform post recession, the ability to get a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, was really challenged. Now you need to have more than 50% equity in your home to get a HELOC, which I don't have. I
Yeah.
think the vast majority of people in Missoula don't have. And so that was a primary financing tool to build an ADU, and that is gone. And so we are really looking, one of the specific recommendations in this housing policy is to look at how we can work with our local banks to create a financing mechanism that allows an individual homeowner to use future rental revenue from an ADU to finance the construction of that ADU. And so if that's kind of the last nut that we're going to need to crack to really see ADUs promoted as a viable development.
So in gambling parlance, it's called betting on the come, basically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So for folks who don't necessarily want to build an ADU, and let's say they have an acre or 3/4 or whatever, and split it up and just sell it, is that a little easier to do than trying to finance it out and build an ADU on your own?
Absolutely. And I wonder if what Charles was referring to as it applies to that is subdividing your lot and building a spec home.
Right,
So, you know,
right.
building a home on speculation that it will be purchased. That is still difficult, again, for those same reasons of being able to have that equity to secure that loan. But subdividing and selling your lot is very possible and requires very little upfront money.
Okay. So now I also want to talk about something you brought up, a place called Villaggio. And I had no idea these were even in the offing. And I think it's great for, as you mentioned, over 1,700 people on waiting lists trying to find, quote, affordable housing. Tell me about these projects that are underway.
Yeah, the Villaggio is an amazing project that.
And where is it, by the way?
Yeah, so our office has supported the development of this project to the tune of about $1 million. And so this is a low-income housing tax credit project that is being constructed on the north side on Beacon Street. And it's going to provide a little over 200 units of income qualified deed restricted housing. And so what that means is that this housing will be available to folks who make below 60% of area median income. So for a single individual, that's about $30,000 for a two-person household, about $36,000 in the city of Missoula. And it is deed restricted, which means they have to maintain those affordability levels for the next 45 years. And so this is a true investment in affordable housing in our community.
Okay. So once this was announced, Are all those 245 whatever units are they already all spoken for, or they all have been applied for?
Yeah, so this is a development that's being built by the Missoula Housing Authority in partnership with Blue Line Development, a group here in town. And so Missoula Housing Authority will operate this project expertly like they do all of their projects. And they maintain that waiting list of, 1,700 individuals. And so folks that are already on that waiting list will get to come directly off that waiting list if they qualify and move into these units when they're ready.
And any others in the offing? Because especially as you travel, in various directions, there are spaces of land. We could put something there.
Yeah. We have some pretty ambitious goals as they apply to the housing policy. In the next 5 years, we are projecting that we will be able to work with our partners in the community to construct over 1,300 units of true affordable housing for folks that make below 80% of area median income, and that housing will provide homes to over 6,000 Missoulians.
Now, let me ask you this: in the spirit of free enterprise here, do some of these folks who make low income, who are on the waiting list, but maybe down the line, can they offer to bid more to move up the list, or is it possible to do that?
No, it's not possible to do that. Yeah,
well, it was worth a try. Okay, so basically, where you are on the list is where you are on the list.
Absolutely.
Well, and we spoke with Brent Wahlberg with Missoula Organization of Realtors, and he said that this is going to be the largest in the state, right? This 200 unit. And so if we're talking in 5 years, we're going to have even more. Is that just here in Missoula that we're talking about?
It is. We're talking about just here in the city of Missoula, and those units are really what we're targeting for the city. And back to your question, Peter, I just want to point out too, when we talk about those 1,300 units and those 6,000 individuals who have access to home, we're not all talking about this income targeted deed restricted housing like the Bellagio. We're also talking about home ownership opportunities that would be sold on the private market. And so those instances, it would kind of be a first come, first serve. But as it applies to these income targeted, federally subsidized units like the Bellagio, that those do revert back to those waiting lists.
Now, I know that we're talking about housing here, but I had let's get Emmett on the line. All right, get up. We put our phone callers first. So, Emmett, you are on Talk Back with Eran and Ginny. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks for taking my call. Well, in these, I've read about these in the paper, the $200, thing of 200 units and some others. It really sounds like a good idea, and I love the concept, but I am concerned about something. It's 200 units. It almost sounds like a housing project. Now, we know that in big cities like Seattle or San Francisco or New York, they can lead to gang infestation. A lot of gangs take over the housing projects. Housing projects get very unsafe to some very unsavory characters.
You never heard of Bed-Stuy in New York, huh?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
yeah.
Are we worried? Is there any concern that this could happen here with maybe a lot of criminals might move in and it might be an unsafe place for all the other tenants? It sounds like a great idea, but I don't want housing projects, and I would want the place to be safe for all the tenants.
That's a good point. So, and any plans for that yet?
Yeah.
Are you that far along?
Yeah. So I would say two things to that. One of them is the Bellagio is a beautiful development, and it's not 7 stories and 200 units. It's a cluster of individual buildings, all 2 to 3 stories, and is really beautifully designed to look like a community, not like a large project, what we envision that to look like in our head. The second thing I would say to that is that what I hear you talking about, Emmett, are behaviors. And those behaviors don't necessarily apply to low-income populations any differently than they apply to the general population. And so criminal activity isn't generally associated with earning a lower income than someone who earns a higher income. And so I think when you look at any area within the city, we need to address behaviors and we need to address criminal behaviors, but that isn't unique to low-income populations.
And I would imagine if you were to talk with Travis Welch or any of the folks or the chief of the city police or Sheriff McDermott, and looking at an area where there's going to be a high concentration of people, obviously law enforcement is going to want to be there and make sure that everybody's cool. In other words, treated like any other neighborhood, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, there's a lot that can be done through design and just making a space beautiful, but I think a lot of that just has to do with general community policing as well.
And not only that, but as you mentioned, the community policing, but as a community, when those folks move in, get to know each other, and start to take care of each other, then maybe what Emmett said might not have a chance to develop.
Absolutely. So we have neighborhoods across the community that are tight knit, supportive neighborhoods, and what this project does is just builds an extension of that.
Okay, we're going to come right back after a 160-second timeout. All four of our phone lines are open for City Talk. The hour has flown by, and we're almost done. About 8 minutes is all we have left. If you have a question or comment, now's the time to give us a call. We'll be back.
It would be a really good show. I don't know if I could get them to do it, but policing in Missoula today, in the population change and in the way development has gone, how do they respond to that? I know for a fact, I've heard the chief say, you build 45 homes in Miller Creek all on 1 acre. The police calls going to be very different pattern from you build 45 unit apartment.
Mm-hmm. Right,
Yep.
right.
That you get people
It's
living
like the
very
clustering.
closely, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Henry's on line one.
Not that people who live in infill do crimes.
It's just,
I mean,
you're
it's-
just cramped
it's hard to
closer
talk about
together.
it.
Yeah.
You ever hear of Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York City? Yeah.
I was thinking Cabrini Green. and
Right,
Chicago.
right.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for joining us on Talkback this morning. We sure appreciate every one of you who listen, and the phone lines are lighting up. When that naturally, we're almost out of time, but let's get Henry first. Henry, good morning. You're on with Eran and Ginny. Go ahead.
Good morning. Just a quick question. How would you feel about drug and alcohol testing for people who qualify for this low-income housing? And I'll take my answer off the air.
Okay, so is that even is something you're even thinking about?
No, that would be a violation of federal fair housing law. And so folks have a right to privacy, and needing a little bit of assistance in housing doesn't take away that right.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, so and I think what Emmett was thinking about, you mentioned Cabrini Green in Chicago, Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York, back in the 60s and 70s when they built these enormous, 30-story apartment buildings. And they eventually were populated by a lot of folks who were not exactly very savory, and they tend to ruin neighborhoods and that sort of. But as you mentioned, this is a totally different design than that, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
and a design that supports families as well.
Right. Let's get Robert on the line. Robert, good morning. You're on with Eran and Ginny. Go ahead.
Let's get Robert on the line.
Yeah.
Okay, you're gonna have to turn your radio way down.
Eran and Jenny,
Yeah, go ahead.
you've talked a lot about the housing, but what about the taxes, man?
The taxes, the real estate taxes.
I mean,
Okay.
Missoula has gone up 150% in taxes, and it's been like schools, and I mean that's part of our economy.
Right, got it. And unfortunately, you're doubling up because we have the delay on. But there are lots of taxes that Missoula has voted on themselves, right? That some people didn't vote for, but others saw it necessary for schools, libraries, things like that. So how do you respond to that? There's not much you can do about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we always like to highlight in terms of how our tax structure mirrors other communities, other states. So a lot of our sister states, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, they're able to both support the development of housing and affordable housing and provide some property tax relief to folks who income qualify that as well, because they have a different taxation structure than we do. They don't stand on property taxes alone to fund infrastructure and housing and to support quality of life for their residents. They have other alternatives like sales tax, like local option tax. And so we are very limited in our taxation structure. And the unfortunate result of that is people are really hit hard by property taxes. And so I think that's a conversation we need to keep having as a community, and we need to keep having at the state level.
So this plan that you folks have come up with, let's take it out, several years from here on in. Obviously, it's going to grow and develop as you go, right?
Absolutely. So this plan is iterative and provides us the ability to continually analyze and course correct to make sure that we are being as aggressive as we need to be without having any unintended consequences on the market. And so we are really striving to hit that 5-year benchmark, but we will be shifting and course correcting along the way.
How can people share their thoughts about the plan? I know you guys have some open houses coming up soon.
Yeah, so we have 2 open houses scheduled. One of those is coming up quickly, May 30th. From 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in City Council chambers downtown. And the second one is going to be June 4th from 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Russell School. Both open houses, so you can swing through at your convenience and provide us feedback and let us know what you think of the plan. And then the last opportunity will be the official public hearing, June 24th at 7 p.m. City Council's regular meeting time. And at that point, City Council will be taking the topic back up.
Let's take a quick call from Dave. Dave, got about a minute. Go ahead.
Yes, there's only like 3 accesses, 3 ways to get to the north side. Is there any ideas about how to improve access to the north side if you're going to increase the population over there?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. And there are plans to do that. So we work closely with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and they have a master plan for that area, which is our newest urban renewal district that looks at access and connection to the interstate and better connection to the city. And you can look at that plan and look at those options on the city website on the MRA page if you click under that urban renewal district.
Okay, so real quickly, how do we find out? We want to read this plan at the way it exists right now. Where do we go?
So this plan can be found on our website, which you can get to through the City of Missoula's webpage. And we have the plan and all related documents right on that site, in addition to a comment form that allows you to comment right on the website and give us your feedback.
Great. Ladies, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. We really like the City Talk segment. It's
Heck
great.
yeah.
Getting a lot of great calls and a lot of good response. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And I just going to take a minute or so here because a caller reminded us to do so, and they're absolutely right. Memorial Day is coming up on Monday, and it's important to remember the sacrifices that the men and women who served in the military, from World War II to Korea to Vietnam to Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, they gave their lives for our country. And there's going to be a sunrise service. I believe there's going to be 58 different wreath laying ceremonies on Memorial Day, starting with the sunrise service at the Veterans Memorial Cemetery.
And the whole schedule's on our Facebook page. We'll post it again.
Exactly. And so on behalf of all of us here at KGVO and Town Square Media, and of course the City of Missoula, I want to say thank you. And thank you for all who served our country and especially gave the ultimate sacrifice to keep us free. So have a wonderful weekend. We will talk to you again next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.